And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 147, wrapping up our positional previews with the relief pitchers, closers, however you want to look at it. I just say relief pitchers now because there's so many of them, and we'll get this wrapped up for you. Then we'll come in the coming weeks before the season starts and get you re-reviewed for the upcoming season and all that kind of fun jazz and stuff, because it is mid-February and pitchers and catchers have reported. It is happening. You can find myself on Twitter at BDentric and my co-host is always on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, my friend?
Doing well. The only place you can come to get the review preview, or the re-review. That's why people love us.
Yeah, it's because we dig in deeper than anybody else. Like, we review the preview of the preview of the review, and it's quite the thing. So it's like a s'more. There's layers to this stuff.
There is, for sure. Sometimes I forget if we're reviewing or previewing. Honestly, I just, it gets mixed up a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be fun, though, because every year we do this, and it's like when we come back and review or the preview or whatever you want to say, we always realize, okay, something's changed, or this or that or the other. It makes a big difference, especially, like we're using DC ADP for all the previews. Maybe we switch to OC, so there's no mains yet, but there's a bunch of OCs. There's at least 12 or 13, so we can get a fab idea of what's going on in the world. It's still different, but we have an idea in that regard, and that can change your outlook on situations, I guess. And plus, now Toby's got all his projections, which he didn't have on the earlier stuff, so he's got more locked in numbers. He's done a few. At least he's in one draft right now. Might have another one done pretty. Might have another one in the works pretty soon. Who knows? I'm just speculating. I have no clue. Just throwing it out there. We have Barf March 11th. That's on the books now, about a month away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that'll be exciting.
That's official. That's official.
I got to get there earlier than usual to get the donuts. Remember last time I was
That's right. That was awesome.
I went there and then I got the donuts. And I was a little late, but other people were late. So
and no one cared because you brought donuts. They just showed up, so it worked out perfect. Yes, it was a nice little icing on the cake, as they say, to have those donuts show up and keep us going.
That was a great metaphor, a great donut metaphor.
I have my moments that I try not to use them all at once, but we'll see how it goes. We'll be no Eno this year, so we'll have to, our little corner will be a little quieter, but we'll have to see how it goes. So it'll be fun
for sure.
It'll be fun.
But some new blood. So
new blood, and I won't give away everything until it's tweeted out there. But we have a sneaky person that might take over the league, so I'm just going to say that out loud. She is very, very talented, so we'll have to wait and see.
I think I know who you're talking about.
The new blood form, at least the trash talking will be to the next level. Let's put it that way. All right, let's talk relief pitching here, and it's a conversation that some people love to continuously have because it's the ever-changing world of closers in baseball and fantasy baseball too. And some are just sick and tired of it because it's like, yeah, you can either wait, get them on the waiver wire, or just draft them early and figure it out. Like, there's people have all their different ideas to it, but that's my point, is there's many, many different ideas to it. And you and I usually share pretty similar approaches to the relief pitching market of things. But with some of your recent experiences in getting closers and saves, Toby, how do you approach saves this year? Or at least how are you planning on approaching saves this year, as they are going early yet again for the elite closers?
My recent experiences, that's such a kind way to say it. Yeah, I've looked back at some of my teams and I'm like, yeah, the saves are an issue. I think, I don't know. It's such a torn thing. I think I get pulled left and right on this one, honestly, because I think there's so much to be said for getting those guys early that are like locked in, but then there's the opportunity cost piece. And it's like, in like a main event or something like that, where you need saves, but you also need to leave with some sort of weakness, like there's got to be something you don't have. I'm tempted to go later on. I think one of the challenges in the approach that I've taken recently is just getting one, so maybe I wait a little bit and get two. Not that you can wait all that long, but you know what I'm saying? Like, closer to rounds, 7, 8, 6 through 8 versus, grabbing a guy in 2 and 3, something like that. So we'll see, so I kind of go back and forth. I was just reading the process, and they had an interesting tidbit about the 2022 main event. And so that was definitely, it was interesting to read that. I won't tell you guys what's in there because you got to buy the process. but I think that may factor into my judgment a little bit. So I think I definitely want to leave the draft with 2 guys, although in my one draft this year, I've only got 1, but it's a DC and like, whatever, man. Like there's there's like 2,500 teams that are going to be in that. I got to get lucky somewhere to compete in the overall, and that's really the one that matters a little bit. So I think I'm going to try to leave the drafts with 2 in like the first 10 rounds or something like that, like guys that are locked in. But I'm going to try to do a little evaluation. Like who are the guys that I like that I feel like can maybe take that next step. The guys that last year. Yeah. So I think I may take a different tact in different drafts depending on what's in front of me. And like I mentioned before, I'm also trying to be a little bit more flexible and not go in with like a really rigid idea of how I'm going to draft and kind of let what happens come to me. So we'll see.
And one of the many key things there that I took away is, and I've started to use it in my DC that I'm in now, is you need to know your formats, because like in a DC, the number of saves you need to potentially win your league or your 80 percentile is a lot lower than in certain fab leagues because you're not fabbing saves. So you can get away with getting like the one guy instead of having to be super aggressive as much as, say, other formats where you need more saves to actually qualify in certain categories. And that makes a big difference. Also, it's the old saying, you can walk away with 2 and be comfortable, or you can just work for it. Like the Guilds talks about it. He goes, there's saves to be had out there. It's just a lot of work. And if you want to work at it, you can get them. But it's like, and there's a lot of failing, and there's a lot of like, you're going to fail, and then you're going to hit this one guy that just crushes for you. That's the game you have to play. If you're willing to play it, it's very doable. It's just not everybody has the time or the willingness or the patience or whatever to do it. So there's where the non-rigid drafting comes into play, is if it's out there. And it's the problem I have every time I draft. Like I want at least 1 for sure. I try to want like 2 out of the first like 15 guys. But there comes a point where you get to a certain level of relievers we'll talk about, and they all start to become the same almost, where there's a lot of similarities, a lot of either bad teams or questionable roles, or just so many things where does it even make sense to take one here, or does it make sense to wait to round 20 and take a spec there? And that's where it starts to get a little more interesting, and there's a lot more opportunity cost questions involved in that as well. So it's a discussion that many people have had on many shows, and we could probably have this forever because there are a lot of different ways to go about it. But I think when we talk about the top 15 going off the board, people might get a sense of where we're leaning on this draft situation. So let's just cut to the chase here, Toby, and let's get to the number 1 closer. We're using Draft Champions ADP over the last 2 weeks from January 30th to February 13th, 11 drafts in the books. And the top closer off the board is the 4th pitcher off the board at ADP of 24.27, Edwin Diaz, coming off his just insane season for the Mets last year, Toby. There's not a whole lot that you can poke holes at if you want. You could say, yeah, he's a closer. Yeah, he's had bad years before and all these things. Back-to-back 32 save seasons, back-to-back 62 innings seasons. Strikeout rate was through the roof this past year. It was
50.2%.
Yeah, it was a year for the ages. It was insane what he put together with the ratios to boot. It was just the one thing I'll say, obviously there's going to be regression. Like you can't be that, like you could, I guess, but it's very hard to be that good back-to-back years. That's my only thing. So do with that what you wish.
Yeah.
Your mic went out.
Oh, my mic went out.
Now you're back.
Oh, I'm back. My mic's in and out. So yeah, I mean, I think yeah, there's very little to quibble with. I agree with you. You have to expect regression from Diaz from last year just because the numbers were out of this world. But if you look at the last, 3 seasons, and obviously one is 2020, so it's a shortened season. But the strikeout rate has been incredible. The walk rate has been reasonable. The swinging strike rate over that period is probably close to, if not surpassing 20%, which is just a ridiculous number. He's not giving up home runs. He gave up a bunch of home runs in 2019, but really outside of that, he hasn't struggled with the long ball at all. So I think there's not a lot to mess with. I know we have a listener question coming up. Diaz is the highest rated closer that I have, on the spreadsheet. He comes in at And this is for DCs, I will say. This is for DCs. He is ranked 16th on the spreadsheet. Definite article. ADP of 22. And this is in DCs. So this is the one that values saves the most. So he'll obviously fall back with different formats, but he's really good. And even though he may not, they may use him in a little bit of a non-closer role at times. Yeah, I mean, the difference is 30 to 30 instead of 40 saves with just, off the charts contributions. He could still get you 40 saves, no problem. So, I think he's the top closer, and there's good reason for it.
Yep, I have him number 1 as well, and then I have this gentleman at number 2 as well, and it makes sense for me. Emmanuel Clase came in second closer off the board, ADP of almost 30, 29.64. He's coming off 42 saves, 10 more saves than Edwin Diaz last year, and 10 more innings pitched. But Diaz had better ratios and a lot more strikeouts. It's pretty crazy. That just shows you what Diaz did last year. But in the saves department, Clase got the job done, and he was filthy as well. Like, he was very, very good last year. Improved the walk rate in a big, big way, which has kind of been a bugaboo of his in recent years, and kept the ball in the park. So I got no problem if you miss on Diaz and you want to go Clase. I got zero qualms with that either.
Yeah, I mean, the major difference, like you mentioned, is strikeouts, and it's not a small difference necessarily, right? We're talking 30 strikeouts probably, something like that. But Clase, from a ratios perspective, has just been incredible. 2 straight seasons with about 70 innings pitched, a sub 1.5 ERA, a sub 1 WHIP, a strikeout per inning, and it feels like there might be a little bit of room for growth there too. Does not give up homers at all. The swinging strike rate is 16.6% this year, 16.8% last year. I think the one place where he's maybe a little different than your typical closer is that he doesn't get the same in-zone contact, so he's not able to dominate in the zone. But at the same time, I mean, last year, this is wild, a 49.8% swinging strike rate. So like 50% of the balls that he's, that are balls that he's throwing are getting swung at. Which is just a remarkable achievement. I mean, it really is incredible. So again, you're not going to find many qualms with a lot of the guys that are going at the very top of this. I think maybe he's the one that you feel the most comfortable with because he combines it with like a 60+% ground ball rate. So he's not walking guys. He's not giving up home runs. It makes it really hard to score some runs on him sometimes. You're hoping to get BABIP lucky, but the dude's never had a BABIP. His career BABIP's at 248. So it just gives you a sense of why he's been so dominant from a ratio perspective.
Yeah, he's been absolutely amazing. So it's, to me, it's the 1A, 1B. If you want to go 1 and 2, that's fine. But those are the 2 clear guys up top for me. So if you want to be aggressive, you got to be aggressive and go inside the first 2 rounds in a 15-teamer. But there's definitely a lot of really nice floor involved in those 2. Now we go to Josh Hader, and this is one of the bigger disagreements throughout a lot of fantasy Twitter these days. ADP of 36.18. He picked up 36 saves last year, which is really, really good. Strikeouts were still just fine. Walks were a problem once again. Ratios through the roof. Home runs went up. A lot of things. Left on base went up. He did have a massive family situation going on in between his trade from Milwaukee to San Diego. It's kind of right about the time when things blew up. Things apparently got better. He started pitching better to finish the season. He's a tough one to gauge because he's going to be the closer on a very good San Diego team. But how broken is he, or is it just the off the field stuff that was the problem? I try to give him a mulligan here at the same time. Like, you look at Enos Harris's stuff model and everything, it's not good. So what's your thoughts on Josh Hader? Because I'm still in on Josh Hader, but I'm not forcing the hand to get Josh Hader.
Yeah, I think he's fine. I mean, I think what you mentioned before about the family situation, I actually haven't done that much research on it, so I'm not sure exactly what was going on. I know there was I just know it wasn't a good situation. So if you look at him, he struggled for a period of time. And really by that, I mean, he gave up 6 runs, 3 runs, 3 runs, 6 runs, 3 runs. And so if you start him after he gave up, those huge things, actually, no. scratch that. I was looking at the wrong thing. If you look at him for after he had that 6-run game, over his last 11 innings pitched, he had 14 strikeouts. He had a .79 ERA. He was not walking guys, 1.59 walks per 9. I at what I'm looking at, I can't get K minus walk. And then I think when you look at the skills as well, I remember doing this when I was doing like kind of my closer research as I was approaching in drafts. If you look at his last 15 games, right? The in zone contact was at 71.1%. So absolutely dominant. The walk rate was down at 8.5%, which is actually below his 3-year average. The strikeout rate, now the strikeouts hadn't necessarily rebounded, but he was still at 30.5%, right? And then the swinging strike rate was close to 16%. So, all of those numbers, while not maybe your typical Josh Hader, were incredibly good. And if you bump it down to 10 games, over his last 10 games, his swinging strike rate was actually above the 3-year average. And his walk rate was down at 2.9%. His strikeout rate was at 37.1%. His in zone was at below 70%. So whatever was going on, it feels like he fixed it. And, whether it was a personal situation and you just couldn't concentrate, whatever it was, I think he fixed it. So I'm not really worried. We really have that window in an entire career where he struggled, and there's a pretty good reason for it. And so I'm totally comfortable taking him.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. That's why I get I'm curious. Not curious the right word, but I kind of get frustrated when I hear people saying like, "Oh, he's not that good." I believe, and people can check, I could be wrong. I believe his wife was having massive issues with the birth of their child, and there's like some scary stuff in the hospitals, and I'd be a mess. I wouldn't be able to go out and pitch. I don't know about you. So he had a lot of off the field stuff, and like you said, you look at the numbers. Once the baby was home and the mom was home and they were settled in San Diego, things started getting better. Shocker. Like off the field's fine. Things get better on the mound. They're human beings. It's that simple to me. And the way he finished makes me feel like I'd be willing to go back to drafting him again. And the funny thing is he was the number 1 reliever off the board the last few years. And now he's number 3. If he reverts back to that number 1 form, I guess you get a gift here. I know people hate hearing that kind of stuff, but if you're trying to look at the angles of approaching the top part of the relievers pool, that's one way to look at it. If you believe he's back to being Josh Hader, this is a good value. It just depends if he is, but we'll see how that goes. I know people hate the value comment, but I don't know what other words you want me to use. Jordan Romano is the 4th reliever off the board, coming in an ADP of 46 right now, and he had a great year too. 36 saves. Strikeout rate was down a bit from previous seasons, but still pretty darn solid. Ratios were great. I think he had a hiccup at one point in time with some dead arm or shoulder issue or something, but he came back and looked great. Only concern I have with Jordan Romano right now is there was rumblings all offseason of them trading for Liam Hendricks or another closer in there to add depth to the bullpen. They went and got I think they got Eric Swanson already, which adds depth to the bullpen. Romano's still the dude. I'm not worried about that much. But they're basically preparing for more, and I still think Nate Pearson could be a back-end guy at some point in time. So I like Romano a lot. I liked him last year even more, but I have no problem with him.
Yeah, I think Romano's the one guy. I don't know if it's the one guy, but I don't love it. I think Romano might be the one guy that I'm just kind of not that into. That's one of these top end closers. Again, he was perfectly fine, but we have the kind of injury history. Last year was the first real complete season he had. Little bit of tapering of skills towards the back end of the year. Again, nothing major. He was still really good, but he's just not as dominant. The control isn't as good. He has less of a history home runs per 9. He was at half of what he had been, previously during his career. So with a low BABIP, so it just feels like maybe the numbers aren't as dominant. He does walk a few guys. And again, like, guys can have warts, but if I'm drafting this guy, as like, in the third end of the third, early fourth round in a 15-team league, I'm not sure I feel confident enough in him to do that. There's some guys going later on that I like more.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with him right now. Last year, I was all aboard the Romano train where he was getting drafted and everything, and now I'm kind of hesitant to go after him. I don't know why, but I guess it's because some of these guys after him, like you said, I like a lot better. Like the next guy, Devin Williams, huge fan of this guy. Absolutely filthy stuff that Devin Williams brings to the table. ADP of around 49, so going a few picks after Jordan Romano. Once he took over the role when Hader got traded, he was still as filthy, but now he racked up 15 saves in the second half of the season. Elite ratios, closer type stuff. I have zero problem. The only thing is he does walk. He has his walk issues. I will 100% acknowledge that. But when you have a 40% K rate, a couple of years ago at 53% K rate, the style bender is filthy when he's on. If he could just cut the walks back some more, it could be even better. But I think when you're looking at ADP wise and the guy that's got the stuff, this is one of the filthier guys out there. So I like Devin Williams quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I like Williams. The projections don't actually like him that much, which I find interesting. And it may be because of just his ability to suppress contact. Here's a stat for you. He gave up 111 batted balls last year. How many barrels did he give up?
I guess I'd like to say 0, but I'll say 2.
He gave up 1 barrel last year.
So right in between. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, over the course of his career, 302 batted ball events, 11 barrels, 3.6% barrel rate. So he's not giving up. I mean, the guy's not giving up home runs. He gave up 2 home runs last year. The ERAs, I mean, I know we don't focus on ERAs, but just the ratios are they're incredibly good. And I mean, the skills back it up. He's got 18% plus swinging strike rate in, the last 2 seasons. The end zone is really nice in the low 70s. He's getting chases on pitches inside the outside the zone. We know he's got the absolutely ridiculous changeup. You did mention the walk rate, but I think the key thing with the walk rate is that that home run rate is down. Yep. So whether he'll be able to maintain that 0.3 versus the 0.83, that he had in 2021 is another question. But even that year, he had a 2.5 ERA with 87 strikeouts in 54 innings with a 1.19 whip. So, again, like the whip is a little bit more of the question mark, but he's got that role. I think he can be dominant in that role. And so I don't mind taking him here. This is actually a little higher than I have him on my spreadsheet. So maybe he's moving up a tick. I had him more in like the mid 50s, but yeah.
He's on the move. And the guy that is going right behind him, though, is Ryan Pressly at 55. And this has been a draft conundrum I've had at times. If I don't go to the elite guys, I look at these two, Williams and Pressly. I think Williams is the better pitcher. I'm not denying that. But when it comes to the game called saves, which we're focused on, I usually lean towards Ryan Pressly. And a lot of that just comes to simple facts. Look at the teams they're on. That's all I'm going to say. Very simple. Like Houston should win another 100 games, 90 to 100 games. Brewers might win 75 to 80. That's a big difference. That's a big difference in the save department. If those are savable games, that's another thing because the Astros might just blow teams out of the water. We don't know how that goes either. But you look at Williams, who's amazing, and I like him better, but you have Pressly, 26 saves, 33 saves last year, 33 saves in 48 innings last year. Strikeout rate was great. Ratios were just fine. The difference between the two is pretty simple. You got, Williams will have the much better strikeout upside, maybe even better ratio just because he strikes so many guys out, where Pressly might get the save. So I guess it comes down to your team context of what you're looking for here. But when I'm looking at overall and I want saves, I was looking at Pressly. If I want the better reliever, I'm looking at Devin Williams, if that made sense to anybody out there. But how do you look at Ryan Pressly, Toby?
Yeah, I've drafted one elite closer this year, and it's Ryan Pressly.
So there's some pot to go. Good.
And it wasn't because I was targeting him or anything like that. He was just the guy that was left over. But when I did some digging, I felt pretty good about the results. Because I was worried a little bit about injury, right? Because he missed time last year. So in his last 11 games after he came off the injured list, he had 78.1% in zone contact. He had a close to 50% K rate, 48.7% K rate, a 38.4% O swing, 19.5% swinging strike. He did have an elevated walk rate, but he still had a 38% K minus walk, and a close to 20% swinging strike rate over that period of time. Finished the season healthy, pitched well in the playoffs. I feel good about him as a closer here. So yeah, I feel fine with him in this spot.
Yep, no problem taking him at all. I also don't mind if you want to wait a pick or two and go with Raisel Iglesias at 56. This is a guy I've always loved year after year. And, it sucked last year. He's having a good year with Anaheim. Got traded to sit behind Kenley Jansen in Atlanta. Prior to that, had 3 straight 30-plus save seasons outside of 2020. Of course, 28 or more in 4 straight. Still got you 17 last year. Another phenomenal ratio season. He only had that one hiccup in 2019 where the ratios were bad. Otherwise, they've been very, very good. He's got the walks in check in recent years. They keep going down. They kind of hovering around the 5-ish, 5.5 mark now. Striker rate's always over 30%. He's just a steady, consistent arm, and now he's on a phenomenal Braves team. Like, in reality, I don't like him versus Presley is quite a conversation to me. I think you might get more strikeouts with Raisel. Both teams could win a boatload of baseball games. It's an intriguing conversation because it feels like most just anoint Presley ahead of him, but now the ADPs are even talking their pick apart. And the more I think about it, I'd probably go Iglesias over Presley personally. I think I might even rank Iglesias over Devin Williams just on the team he's on situation. But I like Iglesias a lot, basically what I'm saying. So what about you, Toby?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I actually think I like him more than the other two as well. For some reason I had in my head that he didn't have as good of a season last season, probably because of the save totals. I had him on a team, so is a little bit of a bummer when it came to that respect. And there was a little bit of skill regression, but I feel like once he got settled with the Braves, he finished off the season really well. He's going to be the closer there. So I'm just bringing up my last 15. So last 15, he had a 33% strikeout rate. Walk rate was down at 3.5%. So 30% K minus walk. He was at close to 20% for his swinging strike rate. O swing was at 47.3%. The in zone wasn't great at 83.3, but the other metrics are, absolutely dominant. And so, again, I just love the situation with the Braves. They're going to win a lot of games. He's going to be there at the end. He throws a decent number of innings, gets a decent number of Ks as well. And where he's going in the draft, I feel like it's just a really nice spot where you don't have to pay up in the first 3 rounds. You kind of snag him in the 4th. Maybe you have your one elite hitter and you've got 2 starting pitchers by that time, or 1 starting pitcher and 2 elite, bats at that point in time. So I like Iglesias a lot and where he's going. So, yeah.
Yeah. I might have to circle him more as a priority and not take one of the early guys and kind of look at grabbing him as my ace closer going forward somewhere along that line. Maybe push him up a few picks, but make a point to get him might be something I need to do. Next up is Felix Bautista, another guy I like a lot. That's why the elites are the elite. There's no sugarcoating what Diaz and Clase did, but this little realm of Williams, Presley, Iglesias, Bautista at pick 63, even a couple guys going after this, all very good closers. All very good. They might not have the strikeout upside of, like, no one's got Diaz's strikeout ability. I don't think so. Maybe Williams, maybe, if things start clicking. But Felix Bautista, he's been filthy. Took over the role eventually, got 15 saves last year, almost 35% K rate, has one of the greatest entrances in all time in Baltimore if you're a Wire fan. He's just electric, and I was glad he finally got the closing duties, and he basically grabbed them and ran with them. Question is, how many games does Baltimore win next year? They are an up-and-coming squad, so that's great. They should win some ball games, but Bautista kind of feels like a Devin Williams light to me. Is the way I kind of look at him. So I have no problems with him. I think if you want saves totals, though, he might get a little overshadowed here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that into Bautista. He was really good last year. I guess it's just the track record paying so high for a guy who has a little bit of control issues and doesn't necessarily have the record, and maybe he gets traded, if he does pitch well, for those reasons. Even looking at like last year, for instance, in his last 15, and again, this is just an arbitrary number, it's subjective. It's 15. I could have chosen 12. I could have chosen 20. Who knows what that would have done, but it's a nice little sample of games for a relief pitcher. Over his last 15, his in zone was 84.8%, so right around league average. The walk rate was at 11.3%. Swinging strike rate was at 15.2. Very good, very good swinging strike rate. Not necessarily those elite levels that we've seen from some of the other guys that we've talked about, except for Romano. But, and still like 33.8% K rate, right? So 21% K minus walk rate. The O swing was close to 40%. So there's some good and some bad, but we just don't have the same track record with him. And so I feel like I'm trying to stay away from guys where maybe I feel like the regression to the mean might happen this year, the regression to the true skill level, which doesn't mean he's necessarily bad, but maybe he's more of a 3.54 ERA guy as opposed to what he is right now. And then again, like with the possibility of him getting traded, I mean, there was even talk that he might get traded last year. Just I want a little bit more from a closer at that point. So anyways, that's what I'm sticking to.
Yeah, like I loved him when I could get him off the waiver wire last year, or you could get him like late in DC drafts and stuff. But now it's a little trickier with Mr. Felix Bautista. I kind of feel the same way about Ryan Helsley, honestly. Like I could be wrong, but I was never really in on him last year. He got 19 saves, which was good, but it was like, is that you got 19 saves in 64 innings? Are we saying that's good for closers now? I don't know. Just trying to like see what's going on here. Strikeout rate jumped tremendously from previous seasons. The ratios were great, like you'd hope for in a closer. But I'm just kind of wondering, A, is this the strikeout stuff legit from Helsley? He probably did make a big change, and I'm just curious. The walk rates dropped in a big way as well, so his whole pitch like dynamic changed, and all of a sudden he became the strikeout guy. But still, like I said, 19 saves in 54 games pitched, and I'm kind of trying to figure out, is this the guy we want at this point in the draft? So I haven't drafted him anywhere because plus Giovanni Gallegos is still there and he's very good. And I'm not saying he's taking the job anytime soon, but nothing surprises me in St. Louis.
Yeah. Helsley I'm okay on. The reason why he took such a huge leap last year was, the velocity. He was up 2.2 miles per hour year over year. So he averaged 99.7. And I think when I look at it, his rolling average graph before, he also finished the season at like at a high for his velo. His average velocity over his last 15 games on his fastball was 100.7. So he was just gaining velo. The one thing that I do worry about is it's just one of those like perfect seasons. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you his 15 rolling from last year. 75.3 in zone, 39.4 O swing, 37.1 strikeout, 11.3 walk. So pretty similar, better than Bautista, but still, high. And then 18.4% for the swinging strike rate. So really dominant stuff. But what I mean by that is, the dude had a 0.185 BABIP last year, and a 93.4% strand rate, and obviously had the 1.25 ERA. So it's like, what do you regress that to? He had a 0.74 whip, so he's still going to be really good. But I just get nervous when the kind of best case scenario happens. And that's a little bit of what you're paying for. But I don't mind Helsley at all. The projections do like Helsley. I mean, And by that, I just mean like they don't love any high closer that's going really high. But, Helsley they have as a 6 +6. So going at ADP of 63, and his rank is 57. Whereas like Bautista was, going at 60 and he's player 62. And then Romano was going at pick 45 and he's ranked 53. Iglesias is a +2. Devin Williams was a -4. So it just gives you like, there's not a huge difference between them, but I like Helsley as like among these closers, like in terms of value, I like him where he's going right now. I think the Cardinals are always a really good team, super good defensively, and also really good ballpark to play in. So I think he's got a lot going in his favor. I just worry a little bit about those guys that like where they just had a perfect season, because those don't happen often twice in a row.
I guess that's the better way of summing up what I was kind of off of him for. I'm just like, he did all of this, and it was just like out of nowhere is not the right way to say it, but it was just kind of like he hasn't done this before. Like, here it is, like, here we go. So I'll wait and see approach for me. A guy that I do like quite a bit, and I like him every year, and his ADP keeps dropping, is Kenley Jansen, ADP of about 73, 10th reliever off the board. And what if I told you this guy has had over 30 saves for 8 straight seasons outside of 2020? That's pretty good. Pretty good when it comes to the save game. A couple 40 save seasons thrown into that mix. Even when people say, he's not the same guy, he's not, his ratios haven't been as good. That's why he's going down here compared to the elite numbers. But when we're talking the game of saves, he gets the job done, and he still gets strikeouts at a pretty good clip. It was over 30, almost 33% again last season, 8.5% walk rate. So those are great. 1.05 whips out. It's still very, very good. It's just the ERA has been a little bit high as the home runs went up last year for Kenley Jansen, but 41 more saves. The dude just keeps getting it done time and time again. 60+ appearances year after year. When people say he's getting old and breaking down, it's Boston. How good's Boston going to be this year? That's a question to have in a situation. But they signed him. He's healthy for now. The dude's going to get the ball in the ninth every time they get a chance to close out a game, and he's proven he can do it time and time again. So I've always been a Kenley guy. I've always enjoyed the fact people let him keep falling in drafts. So I have nothing opposed to Kenley Jansen outside of just not one elite ERAs, which you get from a lot of the elite closers.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well. I mean, there's nothing that like jumps out as being overwhelmingly good, but it's all just pretty good. Like O-swing is mid 30s, that's solid. In zone contacts 81.9%, better than league average, but not as good as he's been historically. Swinging strike rate was only at 11.4%, but he still managed to strike out 32.7 and have a 24.2% K- walk, which was the best number he's had since 2019. You look at his last 15 and it's pretty solid too. So, and going to Boston, I mean, Boston's not a terrible park. It's a decent enough situation. He's got a 2-year deal, so he's probably there throughout the course of the season. So I can definitely see it. The projections hate it for sure. He's -39 going at an ADP of 76 and he's ranked 115. So they don't like it at all, probably because of the skills, I would guess. But it's like you said, I mean, the dude performs. I mean, has he ever had a ERA under 3.71? No. Right. Has he ever had a whip above 1.15? No. And at some point in time he will, and maybe that's this season. But if you're just looking for a guy who's going later on, you don't have to spend the same draft capital on him, and you're looking for saves, then maybe he's that guy.
Yep, absolutely. I have zero problems with Kenley. When most people are starting to get frustrated with him, it's just who he is, and he gets the job done more often than not. I'd rather take Kenley than Camilo Doval. That's coming from a Giants fan here for a few reasons. I don't know how good the Giants are going to be this year. And Camilo's very good. Not going to knock that. 27 saves last year. Can get you strikeouts. But he also walks the farm, and he is so wild at times that it could get ugly and get ugly like fast. Whip is going to be an issue from time to time with Camilo. Maybe he gets better. He's young. He can still flick a switch. I would never doubt that one bit. But he has to learn control, and I haven't seen enough of it to be like overly happy with it. I don't mind taking him if he falls in drafts, but he's not a target with some other guys. I guess the question is after Camilo, it really the cliff starts to show up, and that's the problem. So if you waited, you're almost stuck taking Camilo because he should get you 25+ saves. Like you should. Might get you 30 plus. You never know. But I get really, really worried. I don't want to be put in that position. Let's put it that way. So I'd rather not draft Camilo Doval. I get it if you want to. I just don't know how he's going to improve his control the way he all of last season didn't improve it at all. So obviously things can change. We'll see how spring training looks. But as of right now, I'm really worried about the control issues with Doval.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really interested in Doval at all for the reasons you articulated. I mean, the control's not good. The whip's not good. The ERA's been there, but there's just a lot. We don't have like a long track record. So is that 0.53? You know, is that the home runs per 9, you know, that we're going to get, you know, from him historically, or, you know, is it closer to, I don't know. Is it higher? I just don't have that same, you know, faith in the kind of the track record. K- walk 17.5% is not great for a relief pitcher. Neither is the 13.6% swinging strike, especially for, you know, a guy in these type of situations. So, and I also think Taylor Rogers, I mean, is interesting. I mean, I think he had a worst case scenario last year with the season that he provided. But he's a really good pitcher, and I've liked him in a lot of spots, and it's a really good, you know, hitter's park. It's a great spot for him, I think. And so I worry about him vulturing some saves, if not outperforming Doval and ending up taking that closer role. So I'm not interested at all. Yeah.
It's a good point on Rogers too, because good old Gabe Kapler would have no problem doing that at any point in the season. So that's a very good call as well. So there's 10 relievers in the top 86 picks going right now. There's 11 in the top 86. The 12th reliever off the board is at 101. So 15 picks later, we get outside the top 100 for our next potential closer. That's Clay Holmes, who had a really strong early season for the Yankees, 20 saves as a whole. 2.54 ERA is not bad, but it got kind of rough towards the end. Velocity changed a bit, and like the final stat line was still pretty good, but the dominance was not there, and that leaves some questions heading into 2023. I still think he's the guy for now, but I would admit that it's probably not as locked in and good to go as it's been in years past. So just be wary. I think it's his job, but if he starts to falter, there's definitely options in New York.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he pitched really well, but it wasn't like, I mean, he'd kind of done that before, but not nearly as good as like the first half last year. You know, similar to Doval, like he's not really dominant in the zone. He got a okay O swing, you know, 17.3% K- walk, 12.6% swinging strike. You know, he does get a lot of ground balls, 75% ground ball rate. That's gnarly, man. That's pretty phenomenal. So yeah, I mean, yeah, combined with the injury, I don't know if I'm quite there on him, but yeah, I don't know if I can. I don't know how I feel about Holmes.
Yeah,
but he's in a good situation. I mean, with the Yankees, obviously.
That's the big thing. Like, and he's going to have the job. If he screws up, he's going to lose, and that's kind of where we're at in this part of relievers now. They're all kind of getting to that point, and we know how dominant he can be if he gets locked in. I guess the question is health-wise, because he kind of handled some issues last year. It did affect the end of his season. So we'll know more as pitchers and catchers are reporting right now. We'll kind of get an idea of how he's looking, feeling, and we can actually watch some bullpens, maybe watch him in games a little bit, which would definitely help. If he's throwing well, he might go up ADP because he is with the Yankees, and that's going to bring a lot of weight to it as well. So it's one of those, if you do kind of want to leave with two closers, I have no problem making him my closer too, and just going that route. But, you know, two closers on top 100 picks, that does a lot to the opportunity cost that Toby was mentioning earlier as well. So you got to kind of weigh those things out for you in that scenario. The 13th reliever off the board at ADP 103 is David Bednar. The dude we know is very, very good. There's no denying that one bit. Strikeouts are there. Everything you want's there except a good team to pitch for, as he pitches for Pittsburgh, who maybe wins 50 to 60 games. Bednar's great, but they also use him in high leverage spots too. They'll use him for 3 innings some games. And it's just a weird way to have your dominant closer for your fantasy team. But yeah, I like Bednar a lot. I have not clicked the button though, because at that ADP on the Pirates, it's very tricky for me. Plus, he could get traded, so it's just very tricky all around.
Yeah, I like Bednar. I think he's a really good pitcher. I mean, he's got 2 full seasons now of really good contributions. He's clearly the best guy in that pen. He's had a season with a reasonable strand rate and a reasonable BABIP, and he still put up a good ERA. He's got 2 full seasons of minimizing home run damage, 25% K minus walks, 15% swinging strikes, mid 30% O swings, Z contact around 80%. So all really good, better than a lot of the closers going ahead of him. I think the reason why people are shying away, as you mentioned, is because he's playing for the Pirates. And, that's totally reasonable, but I don't think there's a reason he doesn't get 25 to 30 saves as the full-time closer for that team. And if that's what he's going to be putting up, I think that'll be fine with the ratios that you're getting. Like you mentioned, like, do I want him to be my closer 1? Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I just think I think he's a really good pitcher.
Yeah, that's the conundrum. If you build your team, you can build around a Bednar. I have zero problem with that at all, because the talent is so good. But like I said, there's a question mark between the team, and I think he gets traded. He should have got traded last year, and that makes you wonder, like, does he get the Raisel Iglesias treatment, and he goes to a team where he's not the closer now, or does he go to a team and he'd be a great closer somewhere else too? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Just kind of know that going into it, that's what you're drafting for. Like, there are a couple potential conundrums in that situation, so just keep that in mind for sure. Now we get to our first non-official closer of the closers in the relief pitching department. It's Johan Duran. He's the 14th relief pitcher off the board at 124. Depends on where you look, I should say. Some have him locked in as the closer. Some still have Jorge Lopez as the closer because Baldelli loves high leverage guys, and Duran is a phenomenal high leverage guy. At worst, it looks like Minnesota will be passing the baton from time to time in the bullpen, which makes it a little murkier. So at least this is our first guy that's not like the number 1A in the scenario. He's sharing the role, and that makes it difficult because Duran is filthy, and that's why he could be the high leverage guy. So I have not been able to click the button for Duran. He's so talented, but when it comes to fantasy, for what we need, Toby, it's very difficult to draft him, for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, it is very challenging to kind of click that button, I think, depending on, like if you're in a fab league or something like that. But like you mentioned, he is absolutely dominant. I mean, over the course of the season, 89 strikeouts in 67 innings, 27.4 K minus walks, 17.9 swinging strike, O swing above 40, Z contact around 80%. He's really, really good. And I mean, Jorge Lopez has been good for like half a season, and really struggled down the stretch. So, I do like him the most by far in this bullpen right here. Whether or not, with the draft capital, as you mentioned, without knowing for sure that he's got the saves. But, dominant guys last year, at least, really tended to end up in that closer role in some point in time, including him. Helsley was the same, where Gallego started and Helsley was just lights out, kind of took the role and ran with it. So, yeah, I would say, I think he's really good, but I do think, like, maybe I feel better about getting him in a non-overall, like in a standalone league. Yeah, 100%. Something like that. So,
yeah. I'm with you there because, like, yeah, you can at least use the ratios and whatnot and make it work. And, even people hate these terms, but even like in a DC format, he works great because you don't need as many saves, and he can help you with all those strikeouts and ratios and stuff. So it's a little different, but yeah, he's a tough one to gauge for sure. The 15th and final reliever will really focus in on the top 15 outside of some long shot we will talk about is Daniel Bard, ADP 129, a guy I have not come close to drafting anywhere. He had an amazing 2022. He outperformed his skis in a tremendous way compared to previous seasons. He still is in Colorado, and I just will not be paying this price tag for a Colorado closer at any point in time in my life, and I'm not starting with Daniel Bard. So it's nothing against Daniel Bard. Great 2022 season. Do it on someone else's fantasy team, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, he's a closer, right?
Yeah.
But the challenge being, the 221 BABIP, which is, super low. It's kind of the best case scenario, really low home runs per 9, really high strand rate. The swinging strike rate was actually down. The O swing was actually down. The Z contact was up. So everything headed in the wrong direction. Only 18% K minus walk rate. So yeah, I feel the same way. I would not go after him.
Yeah, not the most ideal spot. So yeah, more power to those that want to roll those dice. Like those are the people that feel desperate about saves, is what it comes down to. I'll just pass in that scenario and go to some later round targets, Toby. Let's do a couple picks from ADP 200 to 300. I love your picks. I like them a lot, especially this first one here. So who's your first target that I'd also be targeting if we're in the same draft, say March 11th?
Yeah, my first one, I mean, there's actually not a lot of guys in the 200 to 300 range. So I felt like I was a little limited on that. But Carlos Estevez, I think, appears to be the closer in Anaheim. And, he's been a fine pitcher, like outside of Coors. He's been perfectly reasonable, throws really hard, doesn't give up. Well, I guess it's hard to say. Let's see. Let me check his splits here for his career. What's his home run? What's his away? His road. I mean, he's obviously much better on the road. What I'm looking for is, there we go. Yeah, 311 WOBA on the road, and he's a Colorado pitcher. About more than a strikeout per inning there. So I think he's fine. I just think he's fine. Like, he's a guy who's got a role, who's going pretty late. I think he can put up like a perfectly perfunctory 3.5 ERA, 1-2 whip, and then potentially roll into 20 to 30 saves, and I think that's really good. Like, I'm not going to talk like he's really great, but he's going around pick 270. So why not?
Yeah, if you're waiting on saves or you're trying to get a late round add to your team, zero problems at all. I'm going Alex Lang, ADP at 225. He's supposed to be the closer for now for the Detroit Tigers. There's not a whole lot behind him like that really tickles my fancy when it comes to the Tigers, but then again, the Tigers shouldn't tickle your fancy when it comes to saves anyways. But Lang should be the guy for now. We saw some really, really good strikeout stuff from him last year, up into over 30%. Problem is, like a lot of these later closers, they all have some warts, and his walks, over 11% walk rate last year. He was below 10% in 2021, which doesn't sound like much, but that's a good improvement for him. So if he can lower the walks a bit, that'll help with the whips, which is 1, 2, 3 last year was the best of his career. So there are definite concerns when it comes to Alex Lang, but also the strikeouts are great. He had a really, really strong season last year. As bad as Gregory Soto can be, we've seen him rack up saves. And at this point in the draft, you are going to have warts, like I said. If you can give me 20 to 30 saves, which Gregory Soto has done, Alex Lang can do that too. And so if you're down here, he's a guy I wouldn't mind. He's not a focus of mine, but if you need a late guy, he's definitely on the board for me. Who's your next guy?
Having a Tiger tickle your fancy sounds dangerous.
Very dangerous. Hopefully, I don't know if you're a declaw person or not, but just be very careful.
Yeah, for sure. My number 2 guy is Daniel Hudson of the Dodgers. And again, I think with both of these guys, it's more just kind of like a risk reward. Before Hudson got injured last year, I think he was in line to be the closer. When Kimbrel was deposed from that role, or when I don't even know if they ever deposed him from that role, but he was kind of the next up in line. And obviously with the injury and Evan Phillips pitching really well, Phillips is higher in the draft. So there's a lot of risk with it, but the Dodgers have been pretty consistent at going with one guy. And if they do give the shot to Hudson, I think we underestimate how good he's been now the last couple of years. 25.8% K minus walk last year, 16.3% swinging strike, 78.4% in zone contact. The O swing is he's never had a great O swing, which kind of sucks, but he still managed to keep the walk rate the last couple of years relatively low. So more just kind of like a risk reward thing, because if he is the closer for the Dodgers, then I think you're in pretty good shape, I would say.
Yeah, I've been targeting Hudson and then Phillips as well. You mentioned Evan Phillips, the guy I'll bring up here. I have no problem taking both in a DC, or at least getting one of the two. I think they're both going to have their moments throughout this season. If I'm doing a fab league, I'd probably go Phillips. I think he starts the season with the job, but Hudson's going to get his for sure. And maybe Hudson starts with it. I don't know. It's kind of a neck and neck deal. Both really good pitchers. Phillips ADP at 236. Strikeout stuff's outstanding, 33% last year. Like you mentioned, K to walk of over 20, almost 27%, whip at 0.76 with a 1.14 ERA and 64 appearances. That's pretty darn good stuff from this kid, 27, 28 years old. Keeps the ball in the ballpark at 3.9% home run to fly ball, which is very good because we know the ball can fly out of Dodger Stadium. So that is something that definitely takes place. Ground ball rate of almost 46%, which does help him keep the ball in the ballpark. So I like everything that involves Evan Phillips. He could be a high leverage guy and give way to Hudson at times. He could be the guy at times. I think they're both going to have their moments. So I just took Evan Phillips because Toby already took Daniel Hudson. So I took the other half of it. And basically, I would make a point, even in fab leagues, I almost want to like stash at least one of these guys. Or if you're doing early fab drafts now, draft them both and then see how spring training goes. And you could always, to have the closer for the Dodgers is not a bad thing to have. Just throwing it out there. I think they're both going to run into double-digit saves this year, so I put Evan Phillips. All right, post 300. Who you got?
All right, the first one I got is Taylor Rogers, not to be confused with Tyler Rogers or Trevor Rogers.
Well, Tyler's his twin brother.
I know, and they're on the same team. It's quite remarkable.
Freaky Friday.
I know, right? Yeah, so I think with Rogers, what I like, I mean, heading into last year, we all loved Rogers, right? As the closer in San Diego, had some struggles there. But, the numbers are still, really nice. Like they're right in line with where he's been throughout his career. He always has been more of a CSW guy than a swinging strike rate guy, 12.3% swinging strike, but a 23.7 K minus walk. The O swing was down a little bit last year, still better than league average, around usual in the zone, but, elevated BABIP, low, and he normally has an elevated BABIP, but more so than usual. Really low strand rate as well for Rogers. So I just think he's a really good pitcher, and last year was kind of a worst case scenario in a lot of instances, knock on wood, famous last words. So, and I think that there's not, I don't think Doval is that good. And so I could definitely see them, going to Rogers in a really good ballpark, for pitchers, as we know, and a smart team and a team that knows how to work well with pitchers as well. So I think he's a pretty similar guy to the guy he's been, and that's a good pitcher.
I wouldn't be surprised if he walks away with a handful of saves as well this year, if not taking a job, as you mentioned. So definitely on board there. I went to Oakland, which is never a good thing to do. Like, you might just want to fast forward to Toby's next guy here. But if you are desperate, Trevor May at 342 has my attention just because he's been a great closer throughout his career. I've always thought he should have gotten a chance at some point in time in Minnesota, but they actually kind of preferred him as the leverage setup dude. He's always had a strikeout rate above, the high 20s, low 30s throughout his career. Walks have been an issue from time to time. He was injured a bit last year. But the reason I bring him up, and there's a battle going on in Oakland between May and Acevedo and Jimenez, and Jackson's still back there. They got a bunch of parts, and what do they win? 40 games. So who knows what they're going to do. But May, I think in the end, gets you decent numbers, and they paid him the money, I think, to give him the shot at least out the gate. Like, Oakland doesn't pay people; they paid Trevor May. It makes sense to try to pitch him and showcase him for a trade in the future. That's the Oakland A's way. So with the options back here, you can go Acevedo. He's going back here. You can pick one of these other Oakland guys if you want. I just think Trevor May has the ability and the pedigree before to potentially walk into this closer role. So that's who I had. But am I in love with it? Not a chance. But that's a guy I would have back here. Who's your next guy? This next guy I like a lot, by the way. A lot.
The next guy is a longtime favorite, Reynaldo Lopez of the White Sox. He's had two Well, I'll say last year he was outstanding. 0.95 whip, 2.76 ERA, 63 strikeouts in 65 innings. But more importantly than that, I think he got the walks down, which was something he struggled with in the rotation. He was much better as the year progressed. 14% swinging strike rate, good O swing. He was nice in the zone as well. Let's take a look at his last however many. And it's, excuse me.
Bless you.
It's more I think it's more a lack of trust in Graveman too. I just don't think Kendall Graveman's all that good.
Agree.
You know? So we'll see. Actually, I mean, Lopez honestly wasn't that good towards the back end of last year. So maybe this is a foolish pick. I already drafted him in my DC. So
I like him as a spec at this point. I think he's a great spec.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, and what I meant by that was he had like a 17% K rate in his last 15. His in zone contact was at 87, swinging strike at 9.7. So not the best numbers, but let's just throw them out the window because we're biased.
I'm with you. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And then the guy I'm going to go with here with my second target is Hunter Harvey. Because Kyle Finnegan isn't that great, let's be honest. And Hunter Harvey's going at 501, which I'll take my chances with. And when you look at the situation, and again, Washington might not win a lot of games, so keep that in mind. But Hunter Harvey's like a former top prospect with really, really good stuff. In 38 games last year, 2.52 ERA for Washington, almost 29% K rate, 21% K to walk, which is solid. 1.14 whip, which I'll take my chances on that one. Fly ball at 44%, not the most ideal situation, but 2.3% homer to fly ball. Probably some regression coming there. Going to throw that one out there as well. But I think he's got electric stuff when it comes to, we've seen him when he gets put to the bullpen. We've seen the velocity go up because he's not trying to start anymore. We kind of wanted this with Baltimore at one point in time. Didn't really work with injuries. He's getting some new life in Washington. At a pick of 500, to me, he's the next man up in Washington. If Finnegan goes, if he gets traded, if he stinks, whatever. Carl Edwards Jr. does not scare me if you want actual talent with it. So I like Hunter Harvey as a spec guy to kind of stash. I've pretty much stashed him everywhere. So I'll take my chances there. He'd be a guy, he's 501 right now. So I'll take my chances there.
Quick question for you, Bubba.
Yes.
Which closer from last year had the highest BABIP against with runners in scoring position?
Highest BABIP against with runners in scoring position. Was he a good closer or just closer?
Good closer, yeah. Good closer.
Highest BABIP against with runners in scoring position. I'd say Kenley Jansen.
No, it was David Bednar at 400.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Devin Williams is number 2 at 370.
Interesting.
Yeah. It is.
I wonder if there's like ground balls that are finding holes because they throw it so hard. You guys are like poking at them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to, that's one thing that I hadn't thought about as we were talking. I was like, oh, it would be interesting to look at some of these like luck metrics, like Clay Holmes is up there with 348. I wonder who's on the other end of things. It's like Pete Fairbanks, 0 BABIP. Doesn't have a large sample at all, but didn't give up a single hit with runners in scoring position for Pete Fairbanks. David Robertson, super low, 1118. And the only reason why I say this is because I was saying it's the best case scenario or like the worst case scenario for some of these guys, like Felix Bautista, 162 BABIP with runners in scoring position. Just those types of things that help keep the ERA lower than maybe it should be, where it's not necessarily a skill thing. There, oh, look, there's Alek Manoah at 184. Yeah, Daniel Hudson's up there as well. Gonsolin, Urias.
Dodgers are team BABIP, though.
I know.
That's been a proven thing. Like they're one I'm really curious to see what the shift changes on. How I think they'll still be just fine. I'm not saying they're going to get shelled, but I want to see the difference. Let's that number change too, because it's going to go up a little bit at least.
Let's look at 3-2 counts.
Oh, your favorite stat. This is Toby's stat right here, folks. For pitching, for hitting, it's obviously home runs per barrel.
Yeah, let's see. Daniel Hudson and Paul Sewell had that. 2 of the 4 highest K- walk rates of relievers. Sewell at 36.8, Daniel Hudson at 38.1. This is for 3-2 counts. Bednar had one of the highest at 30%. Munoz, Presley, Helsley. Leclerc. We didn't talk about Leclerc. I think he fit in that like no man's land where we don't cover him because he's not 200 to 300, but he's not top 15.
He's like 150 to 200. He's one of the ones that just missed, basically.
Yeah, like Edwin Diaz.
I'm torn on him in a big way, so I don't know what to do there.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see some of these pieces.
And in the end, I think we have to always mention when it comes to relievers, and we look at stats and everything, the sample size is so small. So small.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like one
little so I know it's like one little thing going the other direction can completely skew the entire stat line we've talked about and everything.
Yeah.
So
just to give folks a sense, the average K- walk rate. Maybe average K- walk. It's not showing up for some reason. Never mind. We can move on. Sorry. Just going down a rabbit hole.
I don't mind it. These are fun rabbit holes. That's where the real interesting juices come out. But listener questions here. Our buddy Dave Petroziello asks, is there any concern with Edwin Diaz that the Mets keep using him in the 8th against the meat of the lineup like they did the last 2 months last year? That hurt his saves the last 2 months. I know they upgraded his setup men, so maybe they won't, but second round in Maine is a high price to pay to put up with that. I think that's why Clase had 10 more saves. But you're also getting those strikeouts and everything else with Diaz. So I think you just know it going into it personally. If you want the strikeout rate, you go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. Let's look at the projections, what they say. So the projections for Diaz have him at 34 or 35 saves. And for Clase, they have him at 35 or 36. So they have a 1 or 2 save difference. And the reason I bring that up is that they are separated by Diaz is ranked 16th and Clase is ranked 26th. But there's about a $2.50 difference there between them. So what I would say is, even when accounting for, Clase having more saves, Diaz is still more valuable, I think, because of the strikeouts that he provides. But they're close enough where, if you're worried about that, then just go with Clase, because I don't think there's a huge difference between them at all. And in some ways, Clase is a little bit safer because, he gets 60 to 70% ground balls and doesn't give up homers and doesn't walk guys and all of that stuff. So, yeah,
I'm with you 100%. Everything Toby said. Little Book of Calm has a question. In FAB NFBC formats, what are your thoughts on splitting the 9-pitcher spot, 7 starters, 2 relievers, or 6 and 3 versus other splits? Does this change between 12 and 15 teamers? And would you ever recommend these as using a reserve spot on a relief pitcher dart? I think 6-3 works for 12s, 7-2s for 15s. It's my 2 cents. Could be wrong. Toby's the 15 guy. But you need more saves than a 12. That's just the way it works. And I don't mind using a reserve spot on a spec guy. Just know you need to drop him the second you realize he's not a spec guy anymore. So keep that in mind. But like early drafting, like if you're drafting right now or even in March, sometimes, especially in 12s, all you look at the last 2 or 3 picks on spec guys that are still up for battles, and you never know what you run into. But just keep that in mind. Toby, what do you think about this breakdown for Little Book of Calm?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a DC, the 80th percentile goal that you're theoretically going for is 67. So if you have 2 very good closers that get you 35 saves each, then you're all set. But if you don't, then you're going to have to find a third guy at some points in the season. And so I think it's really just kind of like a fungible spot. You're always looking at who gives you the best chance to be successful week in, week out. It's a week-to-week game. So I think having those 2 closers in there, if you've got them, is a great way to start out. And then you figure out how many good starting pitches you have. And if you don't have 7 that you feel comfortable throwing out, then you throw a relief pitcher in there. Or if you get a new closer or a closer spec and you want to toss them in there, then you do. So I don't think it's like one or the other. I think you just kind of mix and match as the season goes on. Sometimes you'll have 3, sometimes you'll have 2. Sometimes you may even have 4, like towards the end of the season, if you're like me and you're trying to catch up in saves. I had one season, like 2 years ago where I had 8 closers in, the last week of the season, because I was not going to, I was fine in Ks and everything and wins and all that jazz. So it was just a matter of the saves. So you just kind of, I think over the course of the season, you want it to be 2.5, and you're just kind of, depends on who's on your team too, though. You don't want to throw out some crappy starting pitcher just because, because there's a spot there.
We've learned in the past that sometimes those bad relievers aren't worth that chance at a few saves. It's almost like getting a bad 2-start pitcher. It just domino effects the wrong direction for you. So instead of trying to improve saves, you hurt like your ratios and other columns in the process. So pick your poisons is what it comes down to. Jeff Johnson asks, what are the Mariners going to do? Sewald or Munoz or a committee? Looks like a committee. When I had Corbin Young on my Mariners preview, and he mentioned Sewald will be the main guy because Munoz they prefer for strikeouts, where Sewald's more like the leverage guy. But Munoz will get his too, because if it's a situation where you have like the heart of the order, you just want a bunch of strikeouts, Munoz will come in. That's kind of how they did things last year. Looks to be the same this year. I see maybe a 60-40 Sewald, maybe 65-35. That's where I would go with it. But it's definitely not a one-way street. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that.
Yeah. I think it'll be divided in different ways. Who knows? I mean, Sewald, it's unclear whether he's going to be healthy, to start off the season. So I think at this point, it's all speculation. I don't mean to avoid giving an answer, but I have no more insight into the Mariners bullpen situation. And, I'd probably just try to go after the guy that has the lowest draft cost at this moment in time that you think might be part of that committee. Munoz is super good though, but he's also coming off injury as well. Yeah, they're
both banged up right now, so they'll be an important one to watch come spring training, because they're both having some issues limping into spring. Joe G's got a couple questions for us here. Is Doval's job? Is it Doval's job to lose in San Francisco? I'd say to start the year, yes. It's losable, but yes. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I don't like Doval. I like Rogers more. So sure, let's do it.
And he says, Clay, same question. Is it Clay Holmes' job to lose in New York? I'd say yes. Graveman's job in Chicago, yes, but we both like Ronaldo. But I'd say all those guys are, for now, would be penciled in as the guy, but
probably
definitely some potential landmines in the way there.
For sure.
All right, Toby, that'll wrap us up. Any final thoughts on relievers as we close down our position previews?
No, yeah. I mean, I think that was fun. It thins out pretty quick.
That's why people are taking them early.
There'll be a lot of different approaches that people take to it. It'll be interesting to see what happens into drafts, right? With such a small number, you could see in that 50 range, from 45 to 55, you could see 6 or 7 closers going right there, and you don't want to be on the wrong end of that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those that then you have to start reaching for stuff and just totally it can make your draft go in a bunch of different directions real quick if you had a strategy that just went out the window type deal. So I guess have different relief pitcher options. Do you want to just say screw it, we're in a fab for the year because it's doable? The fact it drops off so quick shows you how many teams probably will need to be fabbed throughout the year. So just keep that in mind as well. But that wraps up our position previews for the season. We'll be back next week starting our reviews of our previews like we do every single year, more player debates, more movers and shakers and ADP, maybe more fab based than DC based, stuff like that to get you ready as pitchers and catchers are going. Big time draft season's ramping up. We're 6 weeks from the start of the season. It's crazy to think about. We are right there. Toby will be in Vegas in a month doing main event drafts. So it's around the corner quickly, which is beautiful to say. So for Toby, find him on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm on Twitter at BDentric. This is Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 147. Catch you all next time.